The South Carolina Hall of Fame was founded in Myrtle Beach in 1973 to recognize and honor contemporary and past citizens who have made outstanding contributions to South Carolina's heritage, history, and progress.
The first member of the Lynch family to come to America was Jonah Lynch from Ireland, and they settled originally in what today is the Mount Pleasant area and the upper reaches of the Wando River.
Jonah Lynch's son was Thomas Lynch I, and his grandson was the man we know as Thomas Lynch Sr., who was born in 1727 and moved up the coast to the area around the Santee River.
In those days, capable, adventurous young men coming to a part of the world where there were vast amounts of land waiting to be developed. If you were enterprising, intelligent, and aggressive, you had a chance through land grants and warrants to acquire tracts of land.
The Santee region hosted a mixture of French and English pioneers.
The French Santee was settled primarily by Huguenots. Further up the river, you had what was called the English Santee, and predominantly English families. Lynch, being of Irish extraction, would have been considered to be English, definitely not French. There was quite a distinction there, especially in the early days, and you did not confuse the two. I think, too, the Lynches, being very prosperous, made them very readily acceptable into the English establishment.
One of Lynch's homes, built in 1749, was Hopsewee on the North Santee River, where it still stands today. Lynch's plantations used the method of rice cultivation brought to the New World by African slaves.
They realized the importance of flooding the rice fields as a means of having a greater yield. So they hit upon something that was unique. And this, in a sense, was the beginning of their path to great riches.
Indigo was another important source of revenue.
It produces a beautiful blue dye. This was a British colony, and the Brits wanted that dye for the sailor uniforms, and they had the largest navy in the world.
The Winyah Indigo Society was a social assembly of planters in Georgetown who met periodically to discuss the latest economic news from England.
You would have found a wide range of topics ranging from politics to literature to agricultural practices. It was a center of learning and enlightenment in the Georgetown area.
Politics were also discussed at St. James Santee Church near McClellanville, where the Lynches attended.
The churches were not only religious centers, but social and political centers. This is where you went to vote, among other things. And this was part of the Anglican Church.
The hot topic of the day was separation of the colonies from England.
If you look at a number of wealthy families like the Pinckneys and the Lynches, and the Haywoods and the Middletons, it is interesting that they chose to go the route of independence.
Thomas Lynch, a colonial assemblyman, spoke out for planters who, although currently in favor with the British, didn't want to be totally under British control.
Mr. Lynch, being an Irishman, and his family had been Irish for 900 years, he understood the oppressive nature of the British Crown and what its potential was. And this was the first time he actually took a public position in opposition to Crown policy.
Events began to unfold that would project Thomas Lynch Sr. into national prominence.
The Stamp Act was the event which enabled Mr. Lynch to stride onto the world stage for the first time. Before then, he had not met the leaders of New England or the mid-Atlantic states, and they had not met him. And he made an extremely favorable impression upon them. by virtue of the speeches that he gave and the coherent, concise way he expressed himself.
A man of unquestionable intellectual abilities, drive, energy, and an interest in politics. He literally was able to catapult himself to the top.
In 1773, Mr. Lynch was invited on a speaking tour of New England, and he spoke so well that he made a national reputation for himself, and the hinge of fate occurred with the Boston Tea Party the following year. And immediately following the Boston Tea Party, the British government closed the port of Boston, and as a result of the closing of the port of Boston, the First Continental Congress was convened.
At the Second Continental Congress, Thomas Lynch Sr. was instrumental in recognizing George Washington's leadership skills.
It was Lynch's influence with John Adams that enabled John Adams to persuade the New England delegation to support Washington's candidacy as commander-in-chief.
Lynch provided encouragement during tough times, and he helped start what would become the U.S. Navy.
The American Revolution looked like it was lost in the winter of the first year, in 1775 to 1776. Washington had done nothing but retreat, and the troops that were under his command had enlisted for 3 months in each state, and they were all going home. And Mr. Lynch and Benjamin Harrison and Benjamin Franklin were appointed by the Congress to go to Washington and serve as his liaison between the Congress and Washington in order to try to keep the Army together. And as a result of that, when the Revolution began to succeed and the first naval ships were built, the first three were named the Harrison, the Lynch, and the Franklin.
Thomas Lynch Sr. should have been a signer of one of America's most precious documents, but he suffered a debilitating stroke in February 1776.
The elder Lynch was expected to sign the Declaration of Independence, but he became ill, and his son was sent for, Thomas Lynch Jr., and it was the son, Thomas Lynch Jr., who signed the Declaration of Independence. There is a blank space between the signatures of Edward Rutledge and Thomas Haywood Jr., and that was the space in which Thomas Lynch Sr. was to sign.
Thomas Lynch died in 1776 on his way home from Philadelphia to South Carolina. In 1779, his son, Thomas Lynch Jr., in poor health as well, was lost at sea when he tried to go abroad to recover. Thus, the Lynch family, rich, brilliant, politically astute, had no direct heir to enjoy the freedoms of the new republic.